with Melba out, we'll give it a few minutes and we can get started. All right, we can probably get started here, and might be some other folks I know who are going to trickle in a little later. Give me 1 second. Actually, let me do what Melba does and make sure folks know the All right, so yeah, we can get started. Just a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. It'll be uploaded to your YouTube shortly after, and your participation in this meeting is an agreement to abide by the OpenSSF Code of Conduct. All right, let me share for folks. Feel free to put anything you want to talk about in the agenda, as well as your attendance in the, oops, I forgot to add something. 1 second. So yeah, feel free to add yourself to the attendees list, and anything you might want to add onto the agenda. I know that Melba last night said she couldn't make it, so I don't know if we had much on the way of the agenda outside of stuff like blog updates and so on. Before kind of getting into any of that, though, is there anybody who's new to the meeting who wants to introduce themselves?
I can. This is Jennifer Bly here. Hello. I have been around some of the other meetings, so maybe you've seen me there. I lead marketing and communications for the OpenSSF, and so I think it's going to be a great collaboration here, and how we can get the word out about each of these projects.
Awesome, great to have you. Is there anybody else who is new who might want to introduce themselves? All right, if not, we can go into some of the, why don't we actually hold off on the blog updates until oops, until after. But so I see something here about S2C2F. Is that you, Jay?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'm popping that in. There's a couple of things. It's not just that. So there's at the RSA also there's some training being developed as well. Adrian will be presenting S2C2F at RSA. I got a chance to get a look at the presentation ahead of time. Really great stuff and a great conversation around the development of S2C2F. It's work being done here in the OpenSSF, and it's bridging with Salsa and everything else. So there's a lot of good talk around that. There's also a bit of training that's on the horizon too. So for the purpose of positioning, as we get closer to developing that kind of stuff, we may want to look at how we want to market. And Jennifer being here is great for this, but how we want to sit there and promote these things that are coming up, and how we want to do that as a foundation. As we go out and start talking about all of these different frameworks together.
Sweet, that's awesome. Yeah, if there's anything, I don't know if the RSA talks end up getting uploaded to YouTube or something else. If they do, when it does, we can definitely link it. All right. Anybody have anything else? Otherwise, we can move on to blog updates. Okay, so we can move on to the blog updates. So one thing I know is there is the Salsa 1.0 what's it called? The sort of call for feedback. Hold on, where is this? So many tabs open, sorry. Yes, here we go. I do that. Yeah, comment. Okay, I'm going to post the link here in the request for comments. So I'm just going to link that there, and I'll also share it in a second. Just give me 1 second here. So it's pretty simple and straightforward. Just a quick thing, just talking about what Salsa was. We were at 1.0.1. We're releasing 1.0. We're looking for feedback. We're looking for folks to provide input on stuff like, is it hitting the various requirements, so on and so forth. They're looking before it goes out. They're looking for comments from us in the positioning group and other folks, just to see like, hey, does this hit what we wanted to hit? So yeah, that's that. Any comments on this? I know this just went out earlier today.
The only thing I'd say for this one is we should probably get it up this week, given that folks only have till March 24th to leave comments. So sooner the better.
One second, let me actually add that into the notes. All right, so we want this to go out, yada. Okay, now going down the list. So I know Melba is working on developer persona stuff. I know Melba's not on. I don't know if there's anybody else who's been working on that who has any updates on that. All right. The What's New blog, Chris, I think you're the only person on who might be working on that. Is that the, I don't know if it's, yes, or Chris, the 1.0 What's New comparison. Let me actually move this over here so that it's also being shared. Anybody have any updates on this? Oh. Oh, okay. So Chris says he can't be on voice, hasn't done any work on the blog post. It doesn't clear what needs to be done compared to the post on salsa.dev. Yeah, I'm not sure myself. Do you have the link to the post on salsa.dev? Just so that we can. Yeah, this actually looks fine. So actually this might already be the thing that's done. Yeah, I think this is actually the thing that's done. Okay, so never mind. So this is, we can probably list this as status. I'll just double check with Melba just to make sure that we didn't want to cross post this somewhere else as well. Cool. Yeah, so that I believe that's done then. So this one says not needed, so we're not gonna go over that. Salsa tracks, so that one is on me. So I am not done with it yet, but I will. I have a link somewhere, and I will also post this over here so you can share. I only have a couple of paragraphs thus far. I'm going to be writing up a bunch more. Once again, it's not going to be something super long. It's mostly just going to be, hey, why are there different tracks in salsa? And the high level sort of overview, right, is the SDLC is quite large. Salsa is very much focused on the build piece. Because the build piece is one of the more critical pieces that takes all of that untrusted stuff like source code and dependencies, does a bunch of compilation, building, whatever, and then transforms that into an artifact that should then be used in, other folks' dependency chains, supply chains, and or being deployed to production or whatever. And so that sort of thing is kind of a critical piece in making sure it is secure. So that's kind of, we focused on that. And we also didn't want to throw everything in the kitchen sink at the problem to begin with, because that's kind of a recipe for nothing getting done. And so we wanted to make sure that we did one thing, and we did one thing right. And then as it's kind of going on, we're now kind of focusing on the things that kind of go into and out of the salsa build. So this is stuff like source and ensuring that source can be, we can start to trace the source into the salsa build piece. And that's why there's going to be some different tracks. But while we're still sort of focused in that sort of build space. So that's going to be the focus of this on this blog. Feel free to sort of add comments. I'll be writing up a bunch of stuff on it over the next couple of days, and hopefully by next week have something ready for that. All right. So yeah, so that's that. Let me go back here. And this is kind of somewhat why there's the breakup between build versus source. I don't know if we wanted to kind of highlight exactly why that is. But yeah, I mean, this I think is kind of also I think explains why there is the breakup, right? The breakup was, hey, by including everything, it meant that we had to make the trade-offs, right? Where there wasn't salsa tooling for the build, but there was there wasn't great salsa tooling for the build, and we need to have salsa tooling for the build in order to make some of the other pieces easier to kind of, when we start to think about ingestion and that sort of thing. So I apologize, I don't know how to pronounce your name.
It's actually Laura. I'm I guess
okay.
my name, my first initial, my last name is on there. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem.
I had a question about the source integrity and the dependency section of the kind of diagram that is typically seen when you're looking at the very first version of salsa. To understand when we present at the OpenSSF North America Summit, like, should we remove mentions of source integrity and dependencies and just focus on the build integrity for as we're presenting? It was supposed to be salsa for beginners, but I think it's been renamed salsa, the AppSec condiment. But I'll be if the call for proposals is accepted, I'll be presenting that section. So I had a really good footing on salsa before all the new changes, and so I just want to make sure that what we're presenting at the summit is just version 1, or should we talk about salsa as a whole?
Yeah, so my 2 cents on it is salsa 1.0 is very much focused around sort of like the CDF area of, and I guess E as well a little bit. So 1.0 does not cover the full scope, but I think you do want to, so that's what Chris just mentioned there, and I agree. I think we do want to just sort of say, hey, look, this diagram sort of explains what the problem generally is. We are focused around sort of this section, right? The arrows going into and out of, yes. Well, I guess I would sort of, I think we should probably, it depends, right? Because like C is supposed to be, right, like, are you building from, did somebody modify the source before you pulled it in? Whereas the build, like, assuming you trust the build, you're also trusting that it pulled the code from the right place. Yeah, I think that there's some interesting nuances there that I think is worthwhile to maybe sort out. The way I've always viewed it is, if you trust the build, then you trust that what the build pulled in, it pulled it, like, you're not necessarily saying that the source code itself is trustworthy, but it did pull the source code from the right place. or the place that it's claiming to pull from, right? Not necessarily that is the right place, but it's like you have some proof that if it pulled in source code from, evil GitHub, then it pulled actually from evilgithub.com and not, claiming to pull from github.com, and when it actually pulled from evilgithub.com. And I know that's one of the big also open questions still a little bit with the push versus pull, right? Like is source code being pushed into the build versus being pulled in? I've been mostly, when talking about it, since most of the systems that I'm aware of are mostly the pull-based systems, where you have the build pulling the source code in and pulling dependencies in. And so the idea would be, at least from my perspective, is, yeah, I think I would almost add one more thing here for clarity, where the build can say it pulls from it pulls dependencies from these locations or whatever, right? And that it accurately pulls those things down, not necessarily that any of those things have not been tampered with before you pulled it down, if that makes sense.
So
Okay.
the secure software repositories group is, I know I just kind of found out about that working group existing. Is that something that they're going to be working on the source piece of that, or is that going to eventually be folded back into Salsa as a separate track? And do we have like a roadmap for or like a timeline of when that we're going to do that, if we're going to do that?
So my understanding, and Chris might have a bit more details about, because I know Mark is the one who's really pushing a lot of this, so my understanding was always, we try to keep it simple for now because we didn't want to overwhelm folks, especially given one of the big challenges is the securing repositories group is going to be building a bunch of practices and building tools to help secure repositories. It's hard for us to sort of say, hey, you need to secure the source without having a good understanding of how to actually do that. And so I think that was kind of some of that. So I think the idea would be some of those practices and whatever would probably flow back in here. There are some open questions among the OpenSSF groups that even actually my meeting literally after this one is going to be about, hey, there's another group that is building out a whole bunch of supply chain threat models. And does that flow back into Salsa? I don't know, so there's, I think that there's a lot of also confusion within the OpenSSF about where these things and how they get split up. I think that sort of thing needs to be brought back up to the TAC, because I think that there is a lot of confusion about like, is the securing software repositories group in charge of those practices and standards, and that actually Salsa should focus on the build and they can come up with something else? I think that there's legitimate arguments that folks have been making on that front. But currently the way we've been moving forward is like the tools and a lot of the other pieces might fall under different groups, and we might pull those practices into Salsa for the standard. At least that's the way that we've been operating thus far. But I think that might change if the OpenSSF TAC or others kind of say, hey, it would be great if we split it up a little bit better this way or that way.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just trying to piece it all together, so I appreciate the extra.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No. I do agree that it is, or I would posit that it is kind of a mess right now, with lots of overlap between some of the groups. So it's something that I think we need to do a bit better cross-pollination. So maybe even have us go to the securing software repositories group with maybe like, here's what we're doing with Salsa. We don't want to reinvent the wheel if you're already doing this. We might just want to be consumers of what they're building.
Yeah, I noticed there's also a verifiable SBOMs group too.
Yeah, so that is technically currently not under any given group. It was that flowed out of the Intodo project a little bit, and there's some debate about, does that fall under as a subgroup under in toto? Is that something that they want to donate or contribute to OpenSSF? Yeah, a lot of different folks working on a lot of different things, and obviously some of those things are, it's okay to have 2 or 3 groups reinvent the wheel and realize like, oh, actually your thing that you made is better than what we made, so let's just adopt your thing. But yeah. But generally, I think the way that at least when I've been talking about 1.0 to folks on my end, it's mostly like showing this big diagram of the set of threats and then kind of saying what Chris has mentioned. I tend to also include C in there, right? Because I think anything that's under the build integrity, right, where I think I mean, maybe this is worthwhile one more conversation, where I always included C as like, I pulled the code from the right location, and the build integrity is the piece of like, the risk is the build, somebody has compromised the build, modified the source code during the build. So like, you know, and the common attack we showed in a couple of demos was, you know, you modify the source code to say, instead of saying hello world, you transform the source code to say goodbye world. And even though you think you pulled in the source code from the, you know, even though you pulled the source code from the right location, some build element, yeah, I think, oh, interesting. Yeah, maybe that's something we should bring up. I always viewed, from what Chris has just said, I always viewed B being the source and C being the I downloaded it into the build, and the build changed the source files before it actually ran a compilation or packaging step or something like that. But that's something that can be, I think, brought up. Anyway, I'll add my thoughts into that personally. Anyway.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a gray area, like that build from modified source being the threat, and then the well, I call them events of interest. I don't know if you, but they're like C1 through C5 in the original version, where we talk about the different ways to different events that may trigger that particular threat. So it's yeah, it'd definitely be worth it, or definitely interesting to understand how that fits into Salsa version 1.
Yeah. Yeah, and so actually that's one of the reasons why we've been so focused on the build system, is just how many things are involved here, and trying to keep it simple for the folks who are adopting it. And I recognize that there's still, even with that, there's still some confusion.
And I didn't mean to hijack the agenda today. I just thanks for the extra time.
Oh, no. And there's not also a lot on here. And I think it also still ties back into some of the stuff that we're trying to convey to folks, is like, for example, like I was assuming in my blog article that I'm writing for this, right, is I was going to assume that, you know, the way I've sort of been viewing, and this is the thing I'll bring up with Melba, we'll try and maybe sort it out, where it's like, we'll try and figure out where that, let me look at that. Slash track, yeah. Yeah, that's something that I think I'll write something up and try and post that out there. Anyway, okay. Next up, I guess I thought I saw Emmy on, but so Emmy's not on, right? I don't see her.
Emmy from Red Hat, she's on.
Yeah.
She's on PTO this week. She'll be
Oh,
back.
okay. Okay, so yeah, that's so then we'll so I'll just put all right, and then there's a couple other ones which I know don't have owners. I don't know if anybody's taken up on this, but the supply chain integrity positioning blog, the Salsa, Vex, OpenVex, et cetera, like just all these different things that are going over and the sort of comparison between various different standards like the Salsa, S2C2F, Vex, OpenVex, and what use cases they're trying to hit and so on.
I think for that one I think for that one we're keeping our ears to the ground. There's still a lot of volatility in a lot of that stuff, especially on the Vex front. On the Vex side, there's a lot. So ears to the ground. I think we'd be able to come up with something shortly, as a lot of the specs and all the other stuff that's happening in all these different communities start getting developed and start getting published. I think we'll be able to have a better chance at doing a blog that makes sense. Right now, there's way too much up in the air.
Yep, I agree with that. I know tomorrow, if folks are interested, tomorrow at the vulnerability disclosures working group, I believe there's supposed to be a demo from some folks on OpenVex and that sort of thing. And I know that that's contentious among some folks. So should be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I as a matter of fact, I saw a sneak peek, I guess, if you can say that, of what would be presented, because they did that presentation at the CISA Vex working group on Monday. So I expect to see pretty much the same. It wasn't a bad presentation. It wasn't a bad demo either. I'm just interested to see what all comes of that, because we have an idea in that working group where we'd like for that to go. But like I said, a lot of volatility.
Yep. What about the general sort of like SBOM versus salsa provenance? I think this is. Oh, go ahead.
No. I'm not going to get on that. I'm not going to jump on that soapbox today.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is also somewhat there is. I think we should wait till after link / salsa conversation. So I know that there's some conversations about like whether or not, there's some folks out there who think salsa as a provenance spec shouldn't exist and we should just be using SBOMs. Other folks are like believe that there should be just better mappings between them, and there's others who think that they should be completely separate. And so I think some of that needs to be sorted out, especially given that it seems like you can't go a week without a new
it's getting
bomb.
ridiculous. I'm not going to use the word ridiculous. I'm just saying sometimes you can over-engineer something, and then in this particular instance, we seem to be riding that edge a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing that at least I think salsa has done well, regardless of the various other things that are going on. I think the thing of salsa trying to keep the scope limited and then expanding out, and compare that to some other folks who are sort of keeping the scope very, very, very large and trying to support lots of different things. I think they all have their different trade-offs, and I think that's why I also like it being kept separate. Okay. Oh, so opening blog on all 3 sub-projects. So yeah, and I know, oh, so yeah, regarding, I just saw the comment about the P-bomb. I don't know if anything has happened with this yet. It does say it's an open framework. The like Oscar and P-bombs are supposed to be open, but all of these links always just, they don't lead anywhere. And I know some of the folks from, I think it's called Ox Security, is that right? They've been sort of, some folks have reached out to them to kind of get more details, figure out like, are there community meetings? If there are community meetings, then, you know, are there folks to attend and so on. Cool. So opening blog on all 3 sub-projects. So just a reminder, so this is projects. So this is S2, C2F, also. I think we're waiting on just some of the Salsa 1.0 stuff to calm down a little bit, probably before focusing on that. And then I know I can take ownership. Oops. Take ownership of the Fresca one. Marcella, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to add potentially to this list. I know some folks in the Intoto community have been also working on a blog post about how Intoto enables Salsa and other supply chain attestation types. I was wondering if that should also be added to this.
Sure.
Would that be hosted under OpenSSF or maybe CNCF? We're not sure, actually.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I know that always works well is like you have the companion blogs of like,
yeah,
you know, CNCF related blog can focus on like, hey, how Intoto is being used to, you know, like how Intoto helps projects like Salsa to do X, Y, and Z. And then Salsa can be like, hey, how using Intoto enable, you know, like there's areas for collaboration.
Okay. Yeah, I know Aditya is working on, but he's leading that blog post. So I don't know, I can connect him to this
Sure.
group or yeah, I can be that connection since I'm in both communities too. So
Sounds good to me. All right.
And then to add on another blog post that I'm aware of, without sharing too many details ahead of time, for next week, there's a survey that was put out and a report that was generated. Jane Guard took the lead. OpenSSF, Ross Foundation, Eclipse Foundation also participated. So I believe that's coming out next week, and the blog is being drafted currently, and it's on Salsa. The report, a survey of software supply chain security practices and beliefs. So just a heads up about that one. And you may already be aware of it.
Cool. All right. Is there anything else as far as the blogs or anything like that? If not, does anybody else have any agenda items they wanted to bring up? If not, we can give folks back 19 minutes and see you all next week.
Bye-bye.
Right.
Thank you.
bye.